Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to A Gathering Place. And today is third Sunday Politics Talk. And you know that's when we get together. Y'all need to go ahead and get your popcorn, get your drinks, because today is the day that we talk politics with Jamarr Brown and Brandon Upson. And we go into it, and there's a lot to talk about with the midterms coming up. Black men who want to talk about black men or to discuss it, because I'm waiting to hear about that. And we got a video to show y'all about, what the Democrats have done. And this was a pleasant surprise that I received this morning from Jamarr. And we're going to get right into it right after this opening.
Hello, I'm Marilyn Hemingway, and welcome to A Gathering Place. I said, I'm stepping back because we have young voices who want to be heard, and they're moving on something.
Brandon is really important to you and your business.
Even a basic type of technology, you learn it all.
And people are
Good question. That graphic was all kind of wrong, but what it said was right. Democracy is at stake during these midterms, but the date was wrong because the date is October 16th. Y'all know I did that graphic right when I was promoting this show. Y'all get your questions, get your comments ready. We hope this show would be very productive. Let me go ahead and bring in my co-host, Brandon Upson. Hey, Brandon.
Hey, Marilyn, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you very much. Both of us are a little tired because things are happening. I just completed the Gullah Geechee Environmental and Energy Conference in Georgetown yesterday. It was a hybrid, excellent information, great event. 2 days of activities. We did an excursion to Black-owned farms and community garden.
Wow.
Really wonderful. People really enjoyed that. Had an opening reception. Then we had the actual conference itself. And next year, we're going to be in Brunswick, Georgia. So we are growing and expanding. So,
that is awesome.
Yeah.
If folks only knew all the things that you have planned for that amazing organization, they'll be. And I still don't know how you have time to do anything else.
Well, I don't do anything else. That'll do it. It's like, when you have time? I don't do anything else. As a matter of fact, today, an environmental scientist, I spent half of today with Brian Goodwin. Shout out to Brian. He stayed in Georgetown because he wanted to learn more about it. He's coming back. He's a brother. And I want to say that because we need more Black scientists, environmental, marine scientists, archaeologists, anthropologists. Y'all, the chamber, the work we do, it's such a desire for that. I mean, it's such huge opportunity. Y'all call me. I'll tell you more about it. But it was good to be with a brother, an environmental scientist, and I just finished showing him around Georgetown and stuff. And he said, I'm coming back because we couldn't even show him everything, But it's good to be with someone who has that knowledge and everything. But you've been up to some stuff too. Where are you?
I'm in Fredericksburg, Virginia, for the day until I head up to Stafford, which is right above here. And then tomorrow I'll be leaving Stafford and headed to DC, where I'll be up there for 2 days before I come back home. So
I've never heard of Stafford. So
yeah, I know. So
I've heard of Fredericksburg.
Yeah.
So do you know anything about Stafford? Why are you up there? Is this campaign work?
It is campaign work. So we're up in Northern Virginia, in the 7th Congressional District with Abigail Spanberger. We are out here getting the vote out for her Amplify Action Fund, my organization, focused on the Black and Hispanic community. So we have about 40 people on the ground. They've been out here. We just cleared about 20,000 doors since we've been here today. And because of the size that we are, we should have 50,000 doors knocked on by this time next week. So
wow.
Yeah, really working to get the vote out. But let's see, we're not too far away from Fairfax and like Dell City, Alexandria. All of that is like right up in this area.
Very good, very good. So y'all make sure you drop your questions and comments here. Go to our LinkedIn because we're on LinkedIn now live. So we got enough followers on LinkedIn that a gathering place is playing on LinkedIn right now, even as we speak live. And of course, go to our YouTube channel. And what did they say? Share, like, share, and subscribe. You know.
Yep.
Yeah, obviously Marilyn's not used to saying that, right? But anyway, before we get started, this is a nice way we kind of told everybody what we've been up to and continue to do. But this is politics talk, and you in particular brought up you wanted to talk about black men, what's going on with black men. I got a little to add to that. And then also we want to talk about the Democratic Party and the upcoming midterms. And I think this is all tied in together. But I'm going to wait until we watch this video that Jamarr sent us. And hopefully he can hop on. We know Jamarr is right now, Texas state politics are really, he's 22 hours a day with that right now. But we're going to go ahead and show this video and then come back and talk about it, folks. And of course, we always want your comments to be involved with this also. So just give me a second here and we'll get this up and running. All right. And we want to give a shout out to Terry Watkins Jr., who put this video together. So we got to give credit where credit is due. Well, we're back, and Jamarr, thanks for joining us. You have perfect timing.
I know. I come and join, and we're having a party.
Thank you. Thank you. Watching the video and enjoying the music and the information. Thank you for sharing that post with us, that graphic video, because it reminded me everything that's been done. And as you said in our quick little thread, you said it's not perfect, and it's not, but it's a good reminder going into the midterms of what this administration has really accomplished, and it has impacted Black people. And it reminded me, even with the COVID stuff, I received a $61,000 grant through the Gullah Geechee Chamber Foundation to do an entrepreneurship course for the Gullah Geechee community for the next 2 years. And it was from the American Rescue Plan. And I knew that, but to be reminded where that money is coming from and other money that I'm tapping into, we need to be reminded of that. And so thanks for sharing that graphic. And I want to tie it into what Brandon wanted to talk about. I think there's a disconnect with Black men in this election. I don't know if that's the way I should say it, but Brandon, we're going to start with you because you wanted to bring this hot topic to the table. And I think it is a topic we need to discuss.
I think it really, really is. And if you were to go and ask Stacey Abrams, she would concur. I was looking at the policy little video earlier today that you shared. And the thought that came into my mind is, Democrats are really good with policy. they're not the best at presentation. And sometimes the presentation is more important than the policy, because if you do, it's like, what's that saying? If a tree falls in the forest and no one's around, does it make a sound? Right.
Yeah. And perception is reality. So if you have a perception that they're not doing anything for me, or we're disconnected or not engaged together, that's what people are going to believe.
Right. And I told you I was going to drop that video into a couple rooms that I was in and Twitter, and just to see what people said. And there's a lot of mixed feedback. Folks saying, well, they're doing policy and we're indirectly impacted by that, but they weren't willing to say this was specifically for the Black community. This wasn't unlike the Asian hate bill that passed. As soon as something happened, we weren't able to get that for Black folks. They're still afraid of reparations. There's a whole span of responses to that one video citing the policy that the administration has brought forward and that have a direct impact on Black Americans. And I believe that some of mixed reactions to that is the follow-up. Every now and again, you got to educate folks about what you've done. You got to take your victory lap, and you got to make sure the messaging gets to the people in the community. Billions of dollars, trillions of dollars behind the CARES Act. Your organization benefited from it, but what if something you could have let folks know, man, this programming is made possible because of the CARES Act. Get more tangible, more real for folks in your network. Getting to Black men, 20% of Black men voted for Donald Trump, and right. When we talk about eligible Black voters across the country, we have almost 30 million eligible Black voters. We're predicting that 51% of them are going to vote in this election. But how many are going to stick with Democrats? That number, especially when it comes to Black men, as a toss-up in the toss-up column. They don't know how they watch. And we look at these campaigns, started in Black men, found out she was leaking Black men from her campaign. Over here in North Carolina, same thing in the Senate campaign there. If people early, Black voters early, Black men and women early, then when we come, we in this mad scramble to make up the gap, and that's what we're seeing in North Carolina. But the opportunity that's the Black eligible voting population just over the last 2 years increased by over 750,000 new Black voters. That's across a small number of states. North Carolina and Georgia and Texas, the up in the top three, Texas and Georgia were number 1 and number 2, respectively. So once we get these new Black voters and new Black men in the pipeline to vote, now how do we engage them and mobilize them for the election? The last point I'll make is it shouldn't be in the last 100 days, last 90 days of the campaign. We should be engaging the Black community year round, because outside of these elections, there's still policy that impacts those communities.
I agree, Brandon. And just to let you know, your audio's cutting out, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's delayed, but we got what you said. We got the gist of everything that you said, but there's a little delay going on, so I don't know why. But that brings me to Jamarr, because you mentioned Texas, so I want Jamarr. I don't know in this cycle, because there's a lot going on in Texas, that you guys are seeing this pattern, and if you are, what are your thoughts on it? What are you guys doing, or is it happening in Texas where you see what's going on, what Brandon just described?
Yeah, and hopefully you can hear me. If you can't, somebody let me know. But
You're good. You're good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. But one of the things I think that's important in Texas, when you say that there's a lot going on, that is probably an understatement. And I think that aspect is from both sides, of the table. But one of the things I think that's important, especially when you look at the video and to some of what Brandon was sharing a little bit earlier, I think I've said multiple times on this show and also other spaces that I've been able to participate in, is that one, democracy is not perfect. It's our job to perfect it every day. And that's the work that we have to do through our activism, through our organizing, through our participation in the electoral process, through holding elected officials accountable, all the things that we've talked about for 3 years or so, on this show. So that's one. Two, that I've always talked about incremental change as well. I know that, when you look at the example that Brandon gave, for example, when the Asian hate bill was passed, the immediate move on legislation. But I hope that Black voters would particularly consider not only the accomplishments and the achievements here and how it impacts us personally and also collectively in our community, but what we have been asking for as a Black community have been things that what I like to call transformative. We're not asking for the one quick signature on the legislation. We're not asking for the one quick check. We're not asking to just get through one election. I challenge us to think that what we've been asking for is criminal justice reform, where we look at sentencing, right? Where we look at legalizing, but also decriminalizing marijuana, where so many Black men have been locked up for multiple decades for this amount of weed, right? For example, what we've asked for is shifting in the tax code. We're asking for shifting in how businesses are funded. Could be reparations, right? And so when we look at or the school to prison pipeline, etc. So I believe, at least what we have been electing, people like Barack Obama, Joe Biden, and Democrats up and down the ticket, and even in our communities, what I believe is, as I've shared with them, is that we have been asking for what we call transformative policy. And transformative policy is not going to be the one bill. Transformative policy is having to have things such as the Inflation Reduction Act that got passed in a 50-50, with a narrow majority. But it also got passed with bipartisan. There were Republicans that did vote for it. And so at the end of the day, those are the things that we're asking for. And so I hear the thoughts and sentiments and agree that I would like to see change faster. But also as somebody who has done this work for 10, 15 years, I also understand the transformative changes, the transformative impacts that our people have been asking for, and that does take a little bit longer. But I do believe that the accomplishments of the Biden-Harris administration thus far at least builds us toward that. And I'll kind of finish my point as saying, there's a quote that I pulled up from Coretta Scott King, and she says that struggle is a never-ending process, that the freedom that we want, it could be personal civil rights, it could be economic, etc., but the freedom is never really won. You earn it and you win it in every single generation. And I challenge us as Black people to say we earn it in every election, that we still have to show up and that we have to incrementally continue to build. And there are billions of dollars that are moving to the Black community, to Black small businesses, farmers. That's a particular one that we haven't talked about in a while, in terms of supporting farmers and supporting Black people in rural communities, because rural communities are not only white. There are Black people that live in rural communities all across the country. So like I said, not in our group chat, not perfect. We'll never call it perfect. But I do think that President Biden, Vice President Harris, and so many others in the administration, because you have their staff members, you have experts that they work with, you have cabinet members. Those cabinet members have staff. And so it's more than just the people we elect. It's also the people that they hire and that they direct to do the work. And I challenge us to see the holistic picture. And then as it relates to this election, what we've been talking about, Texas has been under another party's rule for about 30 years, at least in my opinion, of the work that we're doing in Texas. This is going to be the closest statewide election in a generation, I believe, in this state. And we have been on the ground, knocking on doors, talking to people. We just had Beto at Duale celebration yesterday. We had him on Saturday visiting Asian Chinatown outside of Houston. We've had Beto in Black churches every Sunday, not 20 days before the election, but for months. And being in this position and being able to work with other people who are doing this work is super important. And so for us in Texas, it looks a little bit different that we've been able to talk about the accomplishments nationally and challenge voters to say, imagine if the governor would accept the money from the American Rescue Plan, $16 billion, what we could have done to expand Medicaid in this state, what we could do to make sure that we protect children when their parents drop them off to school every single morning. And so for us, the messaging has been, what if? And the what if means we have to take a chance and vote for something different and act differently in this election, which, like I said, we believe will be the culture of this generation. So I know that was a lot, but I think that's what I hope that people will start to look at. I know we want the quick bill and the quick check, and that's fine. It's great to have those, but the quick check comes and goes. We want policy that's going to last for a generation and beyond.
I think there's something deeper going on. I think both of you made very valid points, and a lot of points in there, but they're very valid. And I think because if you look at it holistically, and you also look at it long term, this is why it's important that we understand that, one, we know American history and we understand American history and not the whitewashed history. And I think we're going through a cycle as a society, and the question is going to become, what is this country going to look like at the end of this cycle, on the other side of this cycle? With that being said, because Black folks, we are behind, and other people of color in general are behind, let's say, the typical white male. You could look at salary, how much people make in their hourly salary, and we're talking like, 62 cents to the white man's dollar kind of thing going on, 58 cents, 53 cents, depending on what minority category you are in. And that includes women also. That's just one example of a bigger picture of how we are behind as we go through this cycle that is impacting everyone. But because of history and what we see in history, I think part of the problem, and I'm just going to put this out here because I just had a discussion with Mayor Frank McCleary of the town of Andrews, who's a Black man. And unfortunately, they experienced a tragedy about 3 weeks ago, a murder-suicide. A Black man killed a Black mother and daughter. He was married to the daughter, or there was a romantic relationship. And we were talking in terms that this is actually a reflection of a bigger problem going on. And in particular, he brought it up, and he was talking about Black men. He said, we're in trouble. Black men, there is something going on. So we also got into the politics of it. And I think part of it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this disconnect, this disengagement, this voting 20% for Donald Trump. At this point, Mayor McCleary and I both agreed that Black men and Black women, at this point, sometimes a lot of us don't even like each other. Two, they see Black women, I think, achieving things politically. We have a Black female vice president. We have a Black female who just came on the Supreme Court. There are a lot of angry Black males out there. Let me take that back. There are a lot of angry, uninformed Black males out there who are angry at Black females for this perceived you're getting ahead of yourself. And that, I think, is reflected in those 20% that voted for Trump. I think that's part of the reason there's this backlash going on, that they're either disengaged or they're voting for those who don't have the policies to really positively impact them. And we cannot discount that. I think that's why you see it with Stacey Abrams' campaign, where there's this flatness going on, and other campaigns that you see. The immediate impact is midterm elections coming up. But I think there's something going on in the Black community that we need to pay attention to, because there's going to be long-term real impact on an individual community level, but also a political level also, that we're going to see some votes that are not going where we think or expect they would go. And that's a huge concern. And I think that's playing a part in what's going on. So, Jamarr, I see you shaking your head. I mean, any thoughts regarding that? Then we'll go back to Brandon.
I'm going to pass it to Brandon really quickly because this deepens the work that him and Rashad and so many others, are doing. And
thank you. Okay, fair enough.
Because I got to partner with Brandon and Amplify Action and Planned Parenthood on an intentional conversation with Black men during the Congressional Black Caucus Conference, which to me was a powerful conversation. And as Brandon and I were debriefing the conversation, what came up for me in that reaction, because you're talking about the politics, where you look at the Supreme Court justice or the vice president, but we've also had a Black man as president. We've had Black men on the Supreme Court. We've had, Black men serve in the U.S. Senate, U.S. House, right? Mayors and those sort of things too. But what came up before you talk about the politics, as you were saying, is that there's something going on in our community, and it's a thing that is called healing that we have to do as a community, because I think that how we show up in business or government or politics or elections, or education or academia, etc. There's some healing that's got to happen. And I remember I turned to Brandon at the dinner table and I said, Brandon, we're not going to change until we heal. And there's a lot of impact to what you're saying, Marilyn, to what you were sharing from what the mayor was saying, of how we've been negatively impacted by these policies. No excuses, just naming that how we've been impacted by these policies, but then how Black men have taken that, internalized it, and then it shows up in how they show up in the election or don't show up in the elections, and the politics as well. And so I think there's that deeper healing and connecting that we have to do as a community to say, in whatever system we're choosing to participate in, if it's economic, political, etc., whatever system, what is the self and what is the collective community? And I think that sometimes as a Black community, and this is my opinion, y'all, don't read me down now on that. But my opinion is that I don't think that we're as connected as a Black community to say, okay, as Black men, as Black women, etc., as Black families, what have you, this is what we want from our society, and this is how we're going to show up in these systems and participate, and not saying this versus that. It's got to be together and collective. And one of the things that, we've always said as well, at least as I matriculated in politics and in my career, it's always been white people stick together and Black people don't, and this and that. And so we've seen that happen, in terms of some of the politics, whether you like each other or not. And so that's some of at least what I think is happening, is that it's got to be some more healing and some more intentionality around who we are as Black people. What do we want as Black people? What do we want better? And then how do we show up and say, we've got to support different people also across the board, because you need the Supreme Court justice just as much as you need the small business owner. You need the vice president as much as you need a school teacher, right? It's not if. We've got to stop this either or and say and then what's the coming together healing that's got to happen so that we can do better, not only for ourselves, but also collectively. So that's some of my thoughts, but I'll pass it.
So I'm going to talk to you about you for just a second, Jamarr, because you started off saying I'm going to pass this to Brandon, and then you went on. But that's good because we needed to hear it. So go ahead, Brandon.
Well, everything he said was great. But you're absolutely right, Jamarr. I completely agree that, and can y'all hear me good now?
Yes.
Okay. That we need collective and individual healing, but so much of our own cultural norms prevent us from getting that healing, right? It's like, you don't need to go to a therapist. You ain't crazy. Go pray about it and push through is one of those sentiments that keep us from getting the help we need in order to heal from the trauma that we've experienced and the trauma that's been passed down to us. In the work that we did in DC that Jamarr referenced, when we had that conversation, we were having conversations with Black men about health and reproductive justice and reproductive rights, right? And all types and layers of trauma came up while we were having that conversation, and it showed us what direction we needed to go so that we could start creating coalitions and partnerships. But I wanted to get a little more into the weeds when we start talking about the situation between black men and black women. And I won't go back beyond the 90s, because I think the 90s was a era when there was a systemic separation between black men and black women by the imprisoning of black men in mass. Black women went to jail too, but in the crack epidemic, it really stripped a lot of black men from our communities. And then we go right into the hip hop revolution, where some of the negative narrative started to expand and create this talking point that black men ain't shit, quote unquote. I'm quoting, so excuse the language. And then it evolves to where we are right now, and I feel like that wedge between black men and black women in the space that the three of us operate in since 2017, the election of Doug Jones, where progressive woke up and said, wow, black women vote and they can determine an election, so let's invest in black women. But then it lumped black men with white men in the anti-patriarchy conversation, because when you separate white men from this system, they have something to fall back on. When you separate black men from this system, we don't have anything to fall back on or anything to undergird us to build something new for ourselves, or to maintain space for us in this movement. So I think the progressive movement has, instead of instead of fully lifting up our black women, it's done so, but in a way that ostracizes black men and also makes black men feel like they're not a part of the movement. And I think that's some of what's happened when you look at Georgia. Before September, there was not any something you could put your finger on and say that's the campaign connecting with black men, which is what's hurting there. I'll stop.
So my question is, I listened to you and it occurred to me, what can I do as a black woman to be a part of healing this divide, closing the gap, engaging with black men? And I ask that sincerely, even though sometimes I feel as a woman, when I walk in certain spaces, they don't want to hear from me. I'm a woman, not from the sense of, that I'm objectified, that I don't have anything to say in this conversation. When I do have something of value to bring to the conversation, but the end results impact me also. Yeah. But what can we do without the black man rejecting us, getting their backs up, if you will?
Yeah. And you made me think about a quote from Crystal Matthews, where she said, everybody ain't shit, but there's a lot of people who ain't. So I'm just clarifying my blanket statement earlier. And that's another quote, Jamarr. But when we are talking about what a black woman can do, we have to have mutual respect for one another first. And we also have to realize that the hurt that you get from your own community is more intimate and is more accessible, because it's just like what they call, quote unquote, black on black crime. It only happens because of proximity, right? And a lot of what we are seeing in our work, where there are black men holding on to the little bit of influence and power that they have, to their white knuckling it and they're trying to keep anyone away from it, especially a woman from taking it from them, that's a different generation. That is, in many cases that I'm finding, it's not necessarily our generation. It's the quote unquote old guard that's moving out. I don't know what to do with granddaddy, but what I can say about, the Gen X and the older millennials is that when we come in and say, I'm not here to argue with you, I love you, I want to create space with you, that opens up a different conversation. And just being intentional about leading with that love and acknowledging the fact that I'm not here to argue or fight opens up the door. And the last point, I'm seeing this in these Twitter spaces with groups that are talking about reparations, talking about African descendants of slaves, talking about foundational Black Americans. You get on there and it's a lot of negativity and downing each other until someone comes and reset the space and say, this is a place of love. We can hold each other accountable. We can, critique one another so that we can work with each other without demolishing someone in the process of doing that. So it's about going in with that intention, stating it, and then reclaiming it so that we can reset it.
Jamarr, your thoughts?
The only thing, Brandon said it all. So the only thing I'll add is, I think, especially as we have conversation and planning, a lot of times we go in, and this is on both sides, not pointing at one or the other, but we go in with let me tell you about yourself. And let me tell you all the things I don't like, and you're going to sit there and listen to it. And then we leave the conversation with no resolve. So if we're leading in a spirit of love and wanting to get to a place of healing and understanding, to like your question, also as well, I think we've got to figure out, okay, on both ends, how do we find the resolve? And I think we have not been in a place where it's the resolve. It's been versus, and again, it can't just be either or, it's got to be an and. And so I also will just add to that to say, let's make sure that we're figuring out what is the resolve. And if that resolve is making a direct ask of that Black man that you need from him, then that's the resolve. Or what you want to see from him, or what he needs to do, or, what you want to hear, whatever. I think that particular piece is ultimately important. But most of what Brandon said, I agree. And y'all not going to call me out on going on and on. I will be agreeing.
It was good information. I was just calling you out what you opened up with. So how do we translate this? Because I've said this. We've been talking over the last few months about this, that this is a very important election, not only because of who we elect for immediate policy, but if you've been paying attention, this is actually about democracy. I think this election is actually more important than 2024. Because 2022, now, if you've been paying attention to the January 6th committee, that committee has brought forth evidence. My personal opinion, Donald Trump needs to be arrested. Okay.
Under the jail, actually.
Yeah, he really should have, he needs to. All right, you're back.
We know what that means. And this is giving him a level of protection. It is. It's
giving him some protection, and we could throw up, traditions and presidents never been arrested. Well, this is time for a president to be arrested in the history of our country, right? This man has every intention of running for president again, because what else is he going to do? What else is he going to do?
I guess he's going to run for dog catcher. I don't know.
And they're talking this week that if Republicans take control of the House and the Senate back, they're going to disband that committee. At worst, take over that committee, then just change the messaging. So it's all about we were the victims and all of this, which will build up towards 2024. And it's deeper because this all speaks to what we want this country to look like, how we want our government to function. Also, the fact that in front of the Supreme Court is a gerrymandering case out of North Carolina How
Mhm.
how do they draw those district lines and everything? And we have a conservative right-wing Supreme Court at this point. They've stacked the decks in their favor. We've got to make some hard decisions as a country to restore balance if we truly believe in a democracy. So to me, some of this angst, if you will, this anger, that's why I said uninformed. We're looking at the personal injuries to each other rather than the community, the bigger picture of if I don't vote and if I don't vote as an informed person, there's going to be great harm to this country. Then my question becomes to Black men and Black women, where are you going to go? Where are you going to go? Because I'm going to be just brutally honest at this point. The majority of Black people do not have enough money in their pocket to purchase a passport, to go to another country, to live, quote unquote, a better life. So where y'all gonna go? So you might as well, in the place that you are in right now,
Speak now.
do what you can to have the best living that you can. So you can talk all the trash you want, but where you gonna go? And some of you gonna go places and find out racism is meeting you at the door.
It's worse.
Thank you. So that's the question we need to ask each other. Oh, it's not going to make a difference if I don't vote. It is going to make a difference. And I'm not saying that from a Pollyanna point of view, but more brutally, where are you going to go? Because they already killing you in your homes. Make no mistake, it's not going to bother them to pass you in the car and shoot you on the corner. Because that's actually happening already in small pockets, but let them take the Senate and the House back. It is wide open at this point. And this is real. I don't think people really get that because they're uninformed and they're in these social media silos where they can express themselves. Because I'm on TikTok and I actually agree with some of the stuff that's being said, but there's some of it, even with Black women, I'm like, y'all going too far. And I got issues. Yeah, we all got, some issues and all. But how do we get past the anger?
Yeah.
To have the conversation. And the three of us sitting here, we've been doing this over 2 years now, hitting 3 years. We still talking to each other, and we do not agree on everything.
One thing I want to just add an underscore actually what you're saying, Marilyn, because you talked about January 6th and some of the Supreme Court cases and that sort of thing. And yes, those are absolutely important. But what I also want to underscore, we started this broadcast talking about what the Biden administration has done for Black people, Black businesses, Black families. And when I said particularly that it is incremental, it's not perfect, it was going to be worse because the Republicans definitely not going to give you reparations. They're definitely not going to make sure your Black daddy come home with his kids, and those are not the top lines of that party. You got one running for U.S. Senate in Georgia pretending to be a cop. you got one in Wisconsin who used his wife's money to build a business and told everybody else to pull themselves up from the bootstraps. I mean, these are the type of people. You've got people who are running for Secretary of State who voted by mail themselves. Who voted by mail themselves, and then telling other people, no, you can't vote by mail. Let's limit the drop boxes. Let's limit how you can vote by mail. Like it's like, do as I say, not as I do. And that is the type of personality and leadership style that these people are going to bring to the federal government. So if you don't like your representation now and let that case in the Supreme Court, you're going to be in trouble. The affirmative action is going to come up again. Marriage equality is going to come up again. Healthcare, they're going to try to take that ACA. They're going to keep doing it till the cows come home, okay? And so I just want to underscore, what you're saying, but also add that that's why so much is at stake, because some of the progress that we have been, not perfect, but some of the progress we have been able to make pretty much stops, quite frankly. And so I think that that's particularly important. I think that the other piece that you talked about, in particular about the anger, at least from my perspective, is a lot of it is there's just so many people who are ill-informed and misinformed, and it's both. as it relates to how politics works, how government works, what actually is happening, what legislation and executive orders and those sort of things actually mean for people. And then what happens is now, because we have Facebook and TikTok and Instagram, people have free agency and free range to say whatever they want to say. And I had a particular conversation with someone that I had a verbal altercation with the other day, and I said, just because you said it out of your mouth to me doesn't make it true. And let me tell you what the facts are. Let me share this information with you, also, as well. And so that's the piece that's got to be important. How do we break through the misinformation and the disinformation? Because that's where the anger comes from. If I heard this thing, and because it doesn't impact me the way I want to, or it impacts me in a negative way, I'm so pissed off. I either am not going to vote because I'm pissed off, or some people are going to go vote also as well. And so I think that there's some of that. The other piece, I think, to the anger that's come, it's been, as I mentioned a couple times, that we have always operated, at least now in our politics, with the discourse that we have, it's either or. And so a lot of our politicians have set up how the elections, the messaging, the governing, a lot of politicians have set up it's this or that. And then you get people taken aside, and then they're against the people on the other side. And that's why I think the three of us can sit up here and say, okay, well, I look at that differently, maybe because of my life experience, blah, blah, blah. But it's not like I hate y'all or anything. Mm-hmm. But the politics and the discourse of the day says, be against those people. We've seen how Republicans have targeted immigrants, migrants, people of color, young people, LGBTQ people, and they teach their base to hate those people. And then they take that hate, elect into office, pass policies that put restrictions on the existence of those people. That's how we got here. And so that's honestly what's happening. When you're talking about Lindsey Graham, y'all in South Carolina, when you talk about Lindsey Graham saying, I'm going to institute a national abortion ban, which restricts every woman in this country's decision.
Yep.
Everyone, black, white, brown, blue, green, whatever. One man who doesn't have to face some of those same obstacles and experiences can dictate millions of people's healthcare, and not only their healthcare, their personal freedom within their healthcare as it relates to their body and their experience. That's how we got here, at least in my opinion.
I got 3 words for Lindsey Graham. Girls, sit down. Like, he is always doing the most.
Look, that black man ran against him. No, Lindsey don't know how to act.
Don't know how to act. And Jamarr, you said something that I had to write down. I remember going through a campaign training a couple of years ago, like 10 years ago, and they were talking about campaigning from the wedge, using wedge issues to propel your campaign. Now a decade ago, that was something that was being systematically injected into campaigns, not just on the left, but also on the right. So now we've had a decade of this baked into our electorate where they feel like on this one issue, if you don't agree with me, it's all over. And in these, these alternate realities that are on social media, because that's what I call these spaces on Twitter, because these folks are talking about stuff and nobody's willing to get on the ground and actually do some real work. So it ain't real. But they are taking one issue and saying, if you don't agree with me 100% on this one issue, then we got to do what Harriet Tubman would have done to you, and that's shoot you and move on. And that is creating wedges within sub-communities under the black umbrella, right? And when we're dividing ourselves, how are we going to get anything for our collective community if the little bit of power we have is diluted through separation?
I agree with you on that. And we have 11 minutes left if we stay on time. So I'm going to ask you, how are we going to solve the world's problems within the next 10 minutes? But
Jamarr got the answer. He got the answer.
Let's just
Jamarr, you got the answer. I mean, everything that you said is true. Both of you, what you're saying is true, but it really is. We're facing these midterm elections, and the three of us, have been having these conversations for almost 3 years now. And I hope someone out there has been listening, then not only in this space, but our separate spaces where we move. And I think we've made a difference in with some folks. We have. But you're so right, Brandon, what you said about these wedge issues, Jamarr, what you said, and we're like all in our corners, even in the Black community, then we're coming after each other. I personally was attacked, am still being attacked by a Black man on Facebook.
Yeah.
And then he finally got to the point he called my name. He slipped up and he called my name. And I did ask some other Black men to go talk to him, and that has yet to happen. And I'm dealing with
where
that.
he at? I'll go talk to him.
Give us the address.
We'll talk offline about that. But I actually went and talked to my lawyer about it. That's how I got to. And the only reason I didn't go to a defamation suit is because to show the pattern of behavior. It wouldn't meet the standard. And I know I'm putting that out there, and that's fine, because if he hears this, I want him to know I've talked to the lawyer. I don't mind suing, but I haven't talked to this person directly in a year, but I'm occupying space in his mind. And the reason I haven't pushed this is because I realize there's more going on there than just what I've done, and I'm not even targeting this person, but I think that what I'm experiencing reflects a bigger picture here of what's going on. And that's why I brought up this stuff with this translates into folks not voting for Stacey Abrams. Bottom line, it's not hurting Marilyn Hemingway, but it hurts the community, because especially when you're out there on social media and people are reading it and they don't understand the entire context, they actually don't even know the entire context. It becomes a community thing, and it creates dissension, it creates discomfort, it creates anger within the community. And when you bring in politics into it, it actually ends up suppressing the vote because it's bad leadership. And I think that's part of it. And part of it is misogyny. And we have to be very honest about that. It's misogyny and sexism that it's creating division within the community. I'm gonna be okay. Yeah, I'd like something to happen, but that ain't gonna happen. But it hurts the community. Social media magnifies this. Take it away from me. That's just one example. Social media magnifies it. And it's going to show up in the midterms. How do we mitigate the impact in the midterms? The real thing right now, because we have, about 20 days?
23.
23 days? Yep.
Yeah.
I'm counting.
How do we counteract? I see it. I see it in who's involved on a local level. I see it in Stacey Abrams in Georgia, and I'm not in Georgia. I see it. I see it to some extent in South Carolina, but that's a whole nother story. In South Carolina just a red state. We're gonna put that for right now. But I see it. I think Beto is different. Texas is different because I think it's the momentum in other directions is going to counteract that. We hope. We'll see that on election day. But I think long term, this is causing real harm in our community, and we need to talk about it. And we need to have the conversations, not only Black men, and I'm glad you guys did it. Those need to continue. But at some point, Black men and Black women need to get together and have these real conversations and leave the antagonism outside the door and have these real conversations and actions.
I would.
Go ahead, Brandon, go ahead.
No, you made me think of a scripture. My people perish for a lack of knowledge, but in this term, our people perish for a lack of leadership, and that is what we are seeing. If I saw Ellen write this in South Carolina, she is absolutely right. Because although South Carolina is a red state, in the midterm elections, when the natural turnout numbers are low and we have the opportunity to organize and, sneak some victories in there, and we're missing opportunities. We're losing local elections that are supposed to be won and held by Democrats, is because of a lack of leadership. And, I find that my biggest critics and obstacles are not, white folks inside of the party. In some cases, is black folks that I have to overcome in order to get the job done. I have 40 folks working up here in Virginia. I have over 50 working in North Carolina, in the rural areas of North Carolina right now. Got the same working in and around Atlanta, and now we're about to build up staff in Southern Florida. But the hardest place for me to pay folks to go out and do good work is in my own state of South Carolina. Where is the disconnect? Why are we limiting ourselves? Why are we fighting and self-sabotaging our own opportunities to move forward? And that is something for another show that we can talk about when we do the postmortem on this election, because at the end of the day, whatever the results of the election in South Carolina's midterm is going to be, will be our responsibility. And we cannot be on November 9th pointing the finger at someone else and saying they did it and it's not our fault. And the last thing I say, that momentum in Texas is because Texans are taking ownership of their space so that they can create the change that they want to see. And of course, they have great leadership. Thank you, Jamarr, for taking leadership to Texas. And, and we hope that you'll bring it back to South Carolina one day.
Well, I want to I just want to tell Ellen, because I saw Ellen's comment about not receiving an assignment to be a poll worker. Ellen, please don't give up. So please talk to the election commission. Great advice on that, because that is one of the bedrocks of our democracy. Your own community, making sure that you can vote. And making sure that you can participate in the process, right? And likely is your neighbor or somebody you know or grew up with or what have you. But I think that there's this other underlying topic that's happened. And I think folks know I'm the first Black executive director. And I became the first Black executive director of the state party in 2021. I mean, you're talking about decades of not having that. But what particularly has been, to your point, Brandon, not only disappointing, but particularly alarming is you'll get the Black people where this division has happened, and there's Black people in our community that have gotten access and proximity to opportunity, and they think that it should only be for them. And what has happened in our community is to say, I'm glad there's a Black ED, but why is it him? And who does he think he is? Right? That's what we do to each other. That's what we do. And for me, I took this role particularly on it. I try to be intentional about how I operate and how I train others, how I connect with others, is to say, it's a ministry, I believe, to always be the first in anything that you do. But, Marilyn, as you were saying, the person was talking about you on social media. I think about how do I fight back, not only for me in the moment, but I think about how I fight back for who, because there's going to be another Black woman that somebody in Georgetown gets mad at. There's going to be another Black executive director of Texas at some point. I don't know when, but at some point. And I know that we go through certain things because it's a first and people haven't seen it. Even people in our own community haven't seen it. But I also push through and continue to do the work because I've tried to set the thing up for whoever the next person is. They may not experience, what I have experienced. And what it is to me is there's a lack of maturity. There's a lack of information and intellect, quite frankly. And three, there are a lot of people who are devoid of reality, and they create their own reality. And because they can go out and say whatever they want, it's supposed to be real and it's supposed to be a reality for anything else. And so that's what it is. And you get Black people, he don't give us enough money. He don't do this. He don't, and it's always what I don't do. And let's talk about how you've gotten more opportunity because I sit in the seat, but you won't give me credit for that. because it took till 2021 in Texas. So even to your point, Brandon, when you say Texans are fed up, Texans are rising up, it took 2021 to get the first Black executive director, and Texas has the highest amount of African Americans in the country. 2021. And so you have to think about what those things mean. And proximity to opportunity means, at least how I learned it growing up in Charleston, if you went far, other people could go far too, because of how you were connected. It wasn't, and my grandmother would always tell me, she still does, but she tells me, Jamarr, she'll look at me and she said, we're so proud of you. And she'll turn to me, but she said, baby, it ain't just about you. You're there for a reason and to help cultivate and lift up other people. And we've got to get back to that space where we're cultivating and lifting up other people, because just as my parents raised me, my grandparents, Sally down the road raised me too. And then you have, like, I mean, we don't even have that anymore. Where, like, you can't even say anything to people anymore without somebody trying to fight you or shoot you or stab you or whatever. Like, where have we gotten, as a people? So I know that's not the roundabout perfect answer. I know we're at time. But I think that, again, like I've said earlier in the broadcast, that we've got to get back to that place of healing and seeing each other as a community and not as an enemy or not as an opponent. I told this Black state representative, I'm not going to say his name because I'm not trying to get in trouble. But I told her, I said, I'm not your competition. The Republicans are your competition. And at some point, we've got to identify who the real enemy, who the real competition is. And the problem is that we've made each other the enemy. And when people start to focus on what the real problem, what the real challenge, what the real thing that you're fighting is, we'll start to get to a better place. But we've got to live in a place of reality, and we're not doing that all the time.
I think it's a mental health issue. I think it's an issue of proximity, as Brandon indicated earlier, and it's also an issue of you feel lack of power. So when you feel that lack of power, you take it out to the thing nearest to you, because you're trying to instigate some power. You're trying to generate some power. And I think that, and quite frankly, at this point, we've gotten to a point, as the mayor and I said, we don't like each other. And that's where you don't necessarily have to love me to get something accomplished, but you got to have some mutual respect and and even more so respect to understand the community of it, the commonalities, because we also have to recognize within the Black diaspora, the community, we are all individuals also. We don't think alike. We don't see alike. You can't get mad at me because I don't think like you. I have different lived experiences. I have different families, everything. But you got to respect that. You got to respect that. And I think that's something that we've lost, that we need to take a step back and really evaluate that and not envy. And I'm just going to call it out. I think many of us have bought into the white patriarchy, the European patriarchy, but we don't see it because it's insidious. It's propaganda, and you see it so much, you no longer recognize it. And it gets embedded into your psyche, and then you manifest it out because you feel powerlessness, and you're not even realizing that controls you. That goes into so many things. Lack of education. There's one reason they attack the education system, to end the critical thinking. Mental health, lack of access to mental health, therapy, and etc. All of this is coming into play. And it does, we need to continue these conversations, because somebody has to have these conversations so that one or two people can pick it up and have other conversations in other spaces. And Brandon, I'm going to let you wrap it up for us. Me and Jamarr were doing our thing, but we've all touched on this a little bit in different spaces, but we're coming into midterms. Of course, we're telling everybody, go vote. Please go vote, y'all. Just go vote. Go vote. No, vote the way I want you to vote. I'm just gonna tell you that. I know how I want y'all to vote. I'm getting little just desperate. Go vote the way I want you to vote. Go vote. But of course, you can do your thing. But y'all, we got to get smart. But go ahead, Brandon, and wrap it up for us.
Yeah. So if you're in South Carolina, next week, the 24th, you will be able to start voting early. You don't need an excuse. You just need a ride to go to your location and vote. A lot of organizations are putting the list of early voting places up on their websites and Facebook pages, but you can go to scvotes.org and to find your early voting location, or go to the South Carolina Democratic Party's Black Caucus Facebook page, and we will constantly update the early voting sites as they change, because we are pretty sure they will be changing while early voting is happening. If you know anything about how Republicans operate, you better believe it's going to change. But more than knowing where your polling place is, addressing trauma and anything else that we spoke about today, I'm just imploring you, whoever you are watching, that you have a responsibility. I don't care what situation you were brought up in, what you have today, or where you are. If you are living and breathing on this land called America, you have an innate responsibility to be heard and be a part of the conversation, and a communal responsibility to be a part of the solutions to the problems that we're facing. And those problems are on the ballot, whether you recognize it or believe it or not. Every problem that we face as American citizens comes directly back to policy and elections. And if you don't believe me, read a history book and you'll find it right there. So we are obligated as members of this community to vote and make sure that our voices are heard and that we are in the number for bringing solutions to our problems. Please go vote. Don't sit this one out. Don't believe the hype. We can win races in South Carolina. If they can win in Texas, if they can win in Georgia, we can win in South Carolina. So that's all I got to say.
Go ahead, Jamarr.
Can I add the Texas dates just for people listening? So we also have early voting that starts on October 24th. So our early voting goes from October 24th to November 4th. And we do have the Saturday and Sunday voting. So even if you're working the week, that is one thing that we fought to protect, because they were trying to limit the amount of days. We actually, even when the legislators went to Washington, D.C. to break quorum, one of the compromises that ended up happening in the special sessions that we got to keep our full early voting period. So I am encouraged. We fought hard for about 9 months for that, y'all. And so I am really encouraging you. That was part of my job coming in, is to look at that. And we were able to do that. We were able to save souls to the polls. They were trying to eliminate that. They were trying to eliminate Saturday voting also as well. And they were trying to eliminate curbside as well. And we fought that too. We know that they're going to keep coming after these things every session in Texas. But, you know, that's another conversation later. But I think because I'm particularly passionate because, you know, we hear about it from our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, right, about how we had to fight for our civil rights. But to be in this generation, to start off my career, especially at the executive level, that's what I had to fight. I want to fight for education and fair taxes and, you know, fair, clean environment, clean water. That's what I want to fight for, you know, not the basic thing in terms of the right to vote. And so I'm encouraging everyone to, you know, do that. Obviously, Election Day is November the 8th. But we have started, we are one of the state parties in the country that started a full voter protection department as well. So if you encounter any issues in Texas, we have a full-time hotline that's staffed every day of the week. So you can call 1-844-TX-VOTE, 1-844-TX-VOTE. And we also have a voter education site as well. And it's mytexasvotes.org. So mytexasvotes.org location, because there are some counties in the state where you can vote anywhere at any voting location, as long as you have your ID. And there's some counties where you actually still have to vote at a particular precinct and particular location. So again, that's voter suppression too, having different laws for different people. So, but that's another topic again. And so I wanted to share those resources that we're staffing, that hotline to encounter any issue. Please call us. We built that department to make sure that voters can actually vote. And when they encounter trouble voting, they have a real resource that they can use to troubleshoot the issue to make sure that their vote not only gets cast, but that their vote counts. And then also visit that site. We've got sample ballots, polling locations, hours, all that good jazz. And we were able to work with the Democratic National Committee to put that together. Use those resources, and that covers the entire state.
Very good.
Counties.
Very good. Thank you, Jamarr. Thank you, Brandon. I miss you guys. When we gonna get together in person? You know, I'm feeling a little teary-eyed, but I think I'm tired because I just finished a conference, so don't take that personally. But I still
I'll be home. I'll be home for about a week for Christmas.
Oh, let us know. Let us know.
So
So
we'll
get
get
together. I'm gonna go drink with some friends because I need that.
Yeah.
But I'll think about y'all. Brandon, are you considering you still out there knocking on doors the rest of the afternoon?
No, it's just starting to rain here, so I got to make sure folks are not walking in the rain, because they will around here. So I'm about to wrap it up and call it a night. I might do what you're about to do, Marilyn. So we're about to call it.
It's called self-care.
Yeah.
And we all need it. We all need it. But thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Jamarr. Be safe out there. We will be chatting next month. And let's continue the conversation and also the post-mortem of the election. And we hope that everyone will realize this is about democracy. Very serious about that, and that everything we'll get most of what we need done. You know, it's not a perfect world, but we hope that we'll get most of what we need done. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you, Ellen, and all who commented. Really appreciate you, and looking forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, Brandon. Thanks, Jamarr.
Thank you. Let's do December in person, since Jamar's going to be in South Carolina.
Yes, we could do it.
I'll get the
at
date.
the coffee shop again or something. Just let us know.
Yeah.
We'll do it in person and everything.
Okay.
That'll work.
Awesome.
Thank you. Be safe
Thanks,
out
y'all.
there.
Will do.
All right, folks. I always enjoy having Brandon and Jamarr join us, and you also. And thank you for your comments and everything. And remember to please vote on Tuesday, November 8th. It's our democracy truly is on the line. We enjoy having you all with us. And yeah, we're going to do it in person. And when we did it last year, we invited folks to come and join us. So, Alan, hopefully that you can join us when we do it in person. Make a little gathering and good time of it. Yeah, you're welcome, Ellen. Thank you also. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you Wednesday at 4 because at Gathering Place, we're here every Wednesday and Sunday at 4 o'clock. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your I got my stuff loaded, folks. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.